Hi viewers, thanks for joining and welcome to this Signicat webinar. My name is Jasper Miel and I will be your host. With me today are Marianne and Niklas as our guest speakers. Today's topic will be about strong customer identification, news and changes in the Nordics and EU wallet. I will now hand over the word to Marianne.
Hi everyone, I'm Marianne Ajayi. I'm very happy to have all of you here today. Very welcome. I am a product manager at Signicat, working primarily with our authentication products in the Nordics. So I am mainly here to talk about that. And with me I have Niklas.
Yeah, Niklas Fröling is my name. I work as a technical pre-sale within the Signicat Swedish team. So I think I've been in contact with some of you that are listening in to this seminar. So it will be interesting to present what we are doing in the EU wallet and eID space. That's my session today.
Thank you, Niklas. So we have a lot to cover today. So I'm going to just quickly go through our agenda, and then we're going to just basically jump right into it. So first we'll give you just a very brief intro into Signicat as a company. And then we'll move on to talking a bit about the evolution of identities and how you prove your identity. Then we'll look at what an eID actually is and what you use it for, and then a bit about eID and privacy. Then Niklas is going to talk about the EU digital identity wallet, and then we'll finish up with some news from the Nordics. And of course, we'll have a Q&A at the end as well if you have questions. All right, so let's jump into it. So quickly then about Signicat. We are a leading provider of identity and trust services in Europe. We have our roots in the leading identity regions, which is the Nordic countries basically, and the Benelux. We consist of 400 plus identity experts, and we have more than 6,000 customers using our services. Our product portfolio covers the entire digital identity customer journey, both like within national borders and across borders. So that's really our strong point, that you can use our services throughout all of Europe, basically. A lot of our customers use our services for fraud prevention and AML and KYC processes throughout Europe. So that's also one of our really strong points. And we do actually have the highest coverage of eIDs in the world, with more than 25 eID integrations. All right, let's talk a bit about identity and the evolution of how you prove your identity. So as you all know, the traditional way of proving your identity has always been to show a physical document, like a passport or a national ID card, or perhaps your driver's license. But as with everything else, this has evolved over time as we have become more digitalized in society. And this has obviously been even greater. The speed of this digitalization has increased a lot during the COVID-19 pandemic. So as we have moved more from the physical space into the online space, different methods of identifying electronically has been developed. And this figure here shows the majority of those, or the most commonly used methods, which includes, like, for example, video conference, where you sit in front of your computer, or maybe your phone, and you basically show perhaps your passport to an agent that sits on that side in a live session, for that agent to be able to verify that you really are that person in your passport picture. So that's sort of the first step of becoming more digital. And then that has been developed into using a video recordings instead, where you do basically the same thing, but you record yourself with your identity document, which is then later reviewed by an agent. And that was definitely an improvement from the live sessions, so that it's a little, you don't have to sit there perhaps and wait for an agent to become available. So it's a bit of a better user experience. Then another method is to derive your identity through what is called a qualified electronic signature. And a qualified electronic signature is basically the most trusted and secure way of signing digitally. And as part of that process, you prove your identity, and that identity is also used. That's also a method to prove your identity when you're performing online transactions. And then we have, again, back to the video recording. This has been taken even one step further by using AI technology to review the video, so that you don't have to have an actual person doing the verification of your identity. But I do have to point out that this is only legally accepted for lower levels of assurance so far. So these methods that I've talked about so far, they all still, even though they are digital, they still kind of rely on showing some sort of physical identity document in sort of the background, whereas the last two methods of identifying yourself electronically are EIDs and biometrics, and they are what we call more truly digital ways of digital IDs. But biometrics, just like the AI video recording review, biometrics is only legal for lower levels of assurance so far. So if you want to use a truly digital ID to, for example, enroll as a new customer at a bank, you would have to use an EID. So as we have sort of become more sophisticated in the way we can identify ourselves online, we have the cost of doing those identifications have also at the same time reduced at the same time as the user experience and the speed of identifications has increased. So it's really been a win-win situation. So that would make you think, right, that everyone is using EIDs now. But if we take a look at Europe, that really isn't the case. EIDs are actually primarily the main methods of identifying yourself digitally in the Nordics and also in Benelux and Estonia, whereas in the rest of Europe, they are using, if I can call them, the lesser sophisticated ways of doing digital identifications, like the video identity or the electronic signature. So there are different reasons for why the rest of Europe haven't sort of gone as far as in the Nordics. There are both regulatory reasons for that. There are reasons for sort of they're not necessarily any predominant private actors in other European countries that have sort of come together, like, for example, the banks in the Nordics have to create EID schemes that really covers the entire populations. We don't see those same sort of predominant players in the rest of Europe. So there could be some explanations, but there is, of course, many factors that play into this. So let's talk a bit about what an EID actually is and why you would even want to use this. So perhaps to state the obvious, an EID provides digital information to identify a person. And there are several use cases for this, like the three listed here. It can be used for identity proofing, authentication, and signing. And for example, identity proofing is when you enroll or onboard to a new service the very first time. Like, for example, when you perhaps become a new customer at a bank, you have to prove to the bank that you are who you say you are. And because of the regulations in the banking sector, they have to make sure that they know you as a customer. They have to perform AML processes. And so when they enroll you, you have to go through and ask all this or answer all these different questions, and also then prove your identity. And the nice thing about using an EID for this is that the attributes that we'll talk a bit about in a second, they can help in this process, both to identify who you are, but also to sort of fill a lot of these forms so that you don't have to fill in all the blanks yourself or tick all the boxes. And this is great both for you as a new customer, because it's a faster and easier onboarding experience, and it's also great for the service provider, in this case the bank, because it increases conversion rates. So the other use case, authentication, is when you come back as a user and you, for example, want to log into your internet bank to see your account. Then you have to prove again who you are so that you get access to the right account. And then signing, when you sign electronically, it's really important to establish the identity of the person who is signing, so that the signature becomes legally binding and valid, and that it holds up in court. So these are the three big use cases for using EIDs. And like I just mentioned, an EID provides different attributes, right? When a user uses it to perform an identification. These attributes are typically your first and last name, your social security number, your date of birth, and maybe your address. It could be different attributes depending on which EID you're using. Some include also your email address, perhaps your phone number, but basically all of them includes the very basic info about your name and social security number and date of birth. So this is the data that's being shared with the service provider when you use an EID. There are also different levels of assurance when it comes to EIDs, and this is basically when basically tells you how sort of trustworthy an EID is in terms of establishing the identity of a person. So when an EID is classified into these three different levels, low, substantial, and high, you look at basically two things, like how the EID establishes the identity of the person the very first time that the EID is issued to that person. And then the second thing that you will look at is how the EID authenticates the holder once it's actually the user is using the EID to, for example, log into an online portal or something. So depending on how rigorous those processes are, the EID will be given one of these three categories, or will be categorized into one of these three levels. So let's talk a bit about brokers like Signicat and why it could be beneficial for you to use a broker for your EID integrations. So there are a few things to consider here. There could be like national regulations stating that you have to, as a service provider, go through a broker to use an EID for your services. Or it could be like in Sweden, up to you as a service provider if you want to do a direct integration with an identity provider, or if you want to go through a broker like Signicat. But the benefits of going through a broker are basically fall into sort of two categories. One is technical and the other one is commercial. So if you look at the technical side, the benefits are that there are different protocols that you can use when doing identifications. So there's SAML, there's OIDC, etc. And so it's when you go through a broker, it's sort of up to you as a service provider to choose whichever protocol you want to use. And then we, the broker, or at least Signicat, will translate that protocol into whatever protocol it is that the identity provider is using, so that there won't be a mismatch there. So that takes away a lot of the complexity. And the other thing is that the responses that you get back from the identity provider when an authentication is being made, that data can look different from different identity providers. So what a broker like Signicat would do is to normalize that data so it becomes easy for you as the service provider to digest and consume. Whereas if you did direct integrations, you would have to take care of that data normalization yourself, and it could be messy and complex. So that's a lot of the technical benefits that you could get from going through a broker. And then on the commercial side, it's also easier to go through a broker because you would only have to sign, at least with Signicat, one contract. So instead of signing and negotiating contracts with each of the individual EID providers and having to adhere to their individual terms and conditions, you would sign one contract with us, with a broker, and that would also simplify things a lot for you as a service provider. And then we have EID and privacy. So of course, when you use EIDs, the attributes that are being shared or passed on to the service providers are sensitive personal data, right? Like your social security number, your date of birth and residency, etc. Depends on which EID you use. So that has a lot of privacy implications. And as a user, you're also not really in control of who you share what with. You basically share all that data that the EID holds about you with every service provider with whom you authenticate using that EID. So there is, when it comes to regulations, there's some conflicting regulations or some complexity regarding regulations sometimes, because you have, on the one hand, AML and KYC laws that requires companies to collect data from you as a user, whereas on the other hand, you have GDPR, which is basically stating that you should not, that you can only really collect the data that's really necessary for you to perform your services. So it is a bit of a tricky area, but service providers, I mean, it is in their they have a big interest in taking care of the trust and security of their services, because obviously it affects their brands and their customers. So yeah, it's something that most service providers take very seriously. And then of course we do have another side to this, that the party that issues the EID, they can also see where you have used it, so to which service providers you have used it. And that again is something that's being discussed a lot these days, and especially when it comes to the concept of self-sovereign identity. It's becoming sort of a hot topic, that the users should be more in control of the personal data that they share and to whom they share it. So I'm not going to get into more of that because my colleague Niklas will talk more about that topic and the EU wallets as well. So I will hand over to Niklas for now.
In this short section, I will introduce the EU wallet and the self-sovereign identity and how Syndicate play a role in this new ecosystem. So when it comes to self-sovereign identity, it's a couple of things it's include. It will be better security, so it will prevent anyone to know what I share information and with whom. Better privacy in that sense. I can prove something without revealing other information. And I will be in control, so the user will be in control. So I decide about sharing and manage my own data. And the usability that Identity Wallet provide ease of use for both end users and service providers. So when it comes to decentralized identity, there are a number of roles that are part of this. It's the user that is the holder of the identity wallet, and then we have the identity wallet by itself that holds all the data that the end user has, and then we have the service provider that needs information and verified attributes from the end user. And then we have an issuer that provides the attributes to the wallet for the end user, and the data register, which is the source of information, could be structured and unstructured data about the end user. So these are the roles that are included in this new scheme. And the opportunities here for a service provider is that the end user will be able to share more data, because the information is in the wallet, and the end user can accept to send information to the service provider. And it's not only identity data as you do with an EID. It can also contain other attributes that is needed in communication with the service provider. And all these data will be validated and verified by a third party, so that the service provider can actually trust that this information comes from this user and is trusted. And here is a slide from Gartner, just saying that decentralized identity is a hot topic. So it's not only Syndicate that say this, it's also Gartner. And it's will come into play in 2 to 5 years' time, which is also in line with what the EU think about this new wallet thing. When it comes to EIDs and EIDs, this is what Ursula von der Leyen stated in the speech in September 2020, that the Commission will soon propose a secure European e-identity, one that we trust and that any citizen can use anywhere in Europe to do anything from paying your taxes to renting a bicycle. A technology where we can control ourselves what data and how data is used. So what does the European Committee planning here? Well, each member state will introduce a digital wallet. The user of the wallet will have full control of what information to release. And the wallet will include a high-level EID that can be used both nationally and across borders. And it will provide attestation of attributes. And the wallet can provide both attributes and attestations in addition to basic identities. So basically the wallet can be filled with a lot of information, like in the picture to the right. Could be driver license information, education, diplomas, or insurance information, or whatever you would like to put in the wallet, basically. And the wallet will also enable for qualified signatures. So you can use the wallet to sign documents. And a very important thing here is that it will also be usable by the private sector. And that differs the things from EIDAS 1.0, where it was mainly for governmental sector, but now it's open up for also the private sector. The timelines for this is that there are specifications at work right now. It should be ready mid this year. And the target launch is 2025, when this should be live, hopefully. And Signicat's position here, how will we fit in this new role? We will continue to provide trusted services to our customer. And then we will link to this new decentralized ecosystem that we talked about. So this will make transition for service providers simple, security, and trustworthy. Because the future isn't purely decentralized. There will be a need for a bridging between the existing centralized ecosystem with EIDs, for instance, and the new decentralized ecosystem with a wallet. So trusted entities will always be needed. So by using Signicat, you will have the best of both worlds. And to facilitate this, there is some large-scale projects going on. And Signicat will are participating in two of these. It's the European Identity Wallet Consortium, where we focus on digital travel credentials and also incorporating payments and organization identity. And then there is the Nordic Baltic EID Consortium, which is focusing on payment use cases. And Signicat participate in both these. So that comes to an end of my little session, and now I will hand it over to Marianne that will cover what is happening with the EIDs in the Nordics.
All right. Thank you, Niklas. That was really interesting. So let's just go over some new developments and some highlights in the Nordics. So we'll cover all four of the countries. So first of all, we can just start with Sweden. We see an increasing use of EID usage in Sweden. Not surprisingly, Bank ID is still the dominant player. But if you look at this graph here in the upper right corner, it's interesting to see that the user levels of Bank ID has remained pretty constant for the past few years, whereas the number of transactions has increased. So what that says is basically that Bank ID is being used more and more throughout Swedish society, and it's becoming very, very much an integral part of Swedish society and how we do things here. Interestingly enough, there is a challenger for Bank ID called Freja, and even though they are far behind in terms of the number of users, their user base is growing a lot, and they have perhaps a more interesting and more feature-rich EID service. For example, you can in Freja have both your personal EID and also sort of an employer, an organizational EID that you can use while you're at work if you have to, for perhaps like sign a document as an employer or employee. Then you don't have to do that using your personal ID. You can use your organizational ID for that, which is a really great feature, I think. And Freja has also more of a wallet style application than the regular Bank ID. So it's going to be interesting to see how they develop over time. Looking at Finland, FTN, as you probably know, is a network of Finnish banks and the EIDs that they issue. That's still the predominant provider of electronic IDs in Finland. There's also Suomi.fi, which is an EID for public services only. And up until very recently, there was a very interesting project going on that was driven by the Ministry of Finance, in which they were developing a new digital identity card called the Suomi.fi wallet. And this was supposed to be sort of connected to the EU wallets that Niklas just talked about. And very much a new way of using EIDs in Finland. But we just learned, I think it was just like a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, that this project has been suspended indefinitely. So it was supposed to be launched in the fall this year, and now we don't know when it will be launched or if it will be launched. So we'll have to see what happens there. In terms of regulations, there's a new regulation in Finland called M72B, which pertains to the use of electronic identities and how they are used. And one of the major sort of changes that this regulations pushes is that when you as a user authenticate using one of the FTN EIDs, you will now be able to see what party you're authenticating towards, so that you know that you're authenticating to sort of log into your internet bank and not somewhere else. And this is clearly a way to try to reduce the risk of fraud. So that's very good. So this is it has come into effect already, but all the banks and all the different brokers are working on getting the technical aspects of this ready, so that everyone will be compliant by I think it's June this year. So if we're looking at Denmark and Norway, there's been new exciting things happening there too. Both of these countries have more or less issued or launched new EIDs. In Norway, if we start with them, the current bank ID becomes now bank ID High and bank ID biometrics, and these are technically two different type of EIDs, but they will be marketed as one. So we will market it only as bank ID. The one that's called Bank ID High is a new app-based solution. It's technically unchanged from the current Bank ID, but and it will provide authentication and signing services just as it does today, and it will also be at the highest level of assurance. But the new version here, which they call Bank ID Biometrics, or is also known sometimes as Bank ID Substantial, is a different different, and it only provides authentication, and it is only available on mobile, and it requires therefore that you have the Bank ID app downloaded. And the difference, one of the major differences here compared to Bank ID High is that Bank ID Biometrics is at the second highest level of assurance, so the substantial level. And even if it's a lower level of assurance, it is expected that it will support basically 95% of all use cases or all the instances where you have to use Bank ID to authenticate yourself. It's only very few instances to actually have to be at the highest level of assurance. So there currently is another, this is what gets a little confusing, there currently is another Bank ID in Norway called Bank ID Mobile, which is a SIM-based service, and that one will be commissioned in the middle of this year. So this is not the same sort of EID as the new bank ID biometrics. That's also an app. So those are two different things. There are some major UX improvements with the new bank ID app compared to the old bank ID. And it will be way faster to, for example, log in. We were looking at perhaps a login that takes 10 seconds instead of 30 seconds as it could take before. So there's some definite improvements to the user there. In Denmark, they are also moving from an old EID to a new one. NemID is being replaced by MitID that offers a more future-proof solution. So basically, NemID has been around for about 12 years. It works well, but it's not future-proof, and it's expensive and complicated to develop, and it's also complex because it consists of different systems. So MitID is the new version, and then that is more future-proof, and it's more of a modular design, and everything is sort of not collected in the same system. And the migration to MitID is currently in full force, and NemID will be terminated in June this year. Another big difference between MitID and NemID is that MitID offers 3 levels of assurance, whereas NemID had only 1. And MitID will offer basic authentication services and also have a lot of add-on services to it. So these are some main highlights from the Nordics. And with that, I think it's about time to wrap up. So let's conclude a bit what we have gone over today. We have talked about that Signicat is a leading provider of identity and trust services in Europe, and that our platform covers 25 plus EIDs throughout Europe. We also talked about that the Nordics have among the highest EID usages in the world, and is really a leading region in electronic identification. We talked about the EU is taking the next step with the idea of self-sovereign identity and decentralized identities and the EU wallets. And Signicat, of course, is atop on all EID related developments throughout both the Nordics and the Europe. And we're definitely here to help you with whatever questions or situations that you may have. So I think with that said, we will move into the question and answer part of this webinar. So feel free to submit your questions to us, and we will do our best to answer them.
Thank you very much, Marianne and Niklas, for the informative webinar. We received several questions, but due to time constraints, we can only address one question during this Q&A session. However, we assure you that we will reach out to you individually after the webinar to answer all your queries. For now, the question that I will address is, when will it be possible to try out the new wallet solution with Signicat?
Well, I think that question is directed to me then. Well, it's a bit too early to give an answer to this question, because functionality and services will be ironed out during these large-scale projects that we participate in. However, what we can promise is that Signicat will keep everyone updated on the progress and inform you on dates and features when we can make commitments. And also that we will ensure eIDAS compatibility through our solution, and that we can be a broker for the wallet services in various ways. But end word is that I cannot say anything about timelines, since it's very early in this project, but you will hear from us.
Okay, thank you very much, Niklas, for your answer. Well, again, well done to both of you. I'd like to finish off with a huge thank you to all our viewers. We trust to have found that you have found the webinar informative and valuable, and we look forward to welcome you in one of our forthcoming Signicat webinars. Have a great day. Bye.